And greetings, everybody, and welcome to Buzz for Good, where we talk all things nonprofit, the people they serve and the good they do. And on today's show, there is a lot of debate happening in our country right now revolving around racial issues, the legacy of slavery, civil rights, segregation, desegregation, discrimination, and so on. And some today may question whether racism is still alive and well, or whether it is just a thing of the past. But if you happen to buzz down to Roanoke's Taubman Museum of Art or Harrison Museum of African American Culture, you can see firsthand how the impact of racism from the past continues to impact Black Americans today. And that is due to a remarkable exhibit that both museums are hosting through March the 29th. And I'm going to share conversations I had this week with the curators of this exhibit titled David Ramey, Gainsborough Road and Beyond. And I encourage you to visit this free exhibit while it is still open to the public. But before we get to that, let me introduce myself. I am Michael Hemphill, creator and host of this radio show, Buzz for Good, as well as the TV show Buzz that airs every Wednesday night, 7 p.m. on Blue Ridge PBS, as well as on our YouTube channel at Buzz for Good. I encourage you to visit our YouTube channel and watch our newest Buzz episode that just aired, starring Salem Area Ecumenical Ministries, which received some fabulous pro bono marketing from our good friends at Wheeler Digital. We're currently working on some new episodes featuring the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, Friends of the Blue Ridge, New River Valley Time Bank, and I would encourage you, if you know of a nonprofit in need of some buzz, please reach out to me via our website, buzzforgood.com. That's buzz, B-U-Z-Z, 4good.com. Or our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, all at Buzz for Good. And let me know, and maybe we can feature them here on this radio show or our TV show. I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors, Friendship, a senior living retirement community serving the Roanoke Valley, friendship.us, Partners in Financial Planning, a Southwest Virginia-based financial management firm, partnersinfinancialplanning.com, and First Bank and Trust, headquartered in Southwest Virginia, providing individuals and businesses with an exceptional suite of tools, resources, and solutions to navigate financial life. FirstBank.com. And speaking of sponsorships, Buzz for Good is thrilled to sponsor a free concert at the Taubman Museum of Art on Sunday, April 14th at 2 p.m. Southwest Virginia's own Addie Levy is a 21-year-old singing and mandolin playing prodigy who now splits her time between Virginia and Nashville, along with gigs at Dollywood. Now in Nashville, she teamed up with two other spectacular musicians to create this stellar band, Domino, that performs bluegrass, jazz, and swing. And you are listening right now to one of Domino's recent live recordings of that classic Summertime. And here is Addie Levy on the mandolin and microphone.
One of these mornings, you're together, spread your wings, take to the sky until that day.
Now, the official bio of Domino goes like this. Their music, polished through years of exploration, brings a magic to the stage. All three members are nationally touring musicians working for multiple artists and touring under their own names. Now joined together, the three create a powerhouse trio that shows off each of their strengths and true love for music. So I do hope that you will join me at the Taubman Museum on Sunday, April 14th at 2 p.m. for this free concert. Again, tune into our social media channels and website for updates. Now, speaking of the Taubman, I recently had the opportunity to write a story for Cardinal News about the exhibit, David Ramey, Gainsborough Road and Beyond, which features hundreds of gorgeous drawings from Mr. Ramey, who captured the vitality of Roanoke's African American communities from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, until those communities were destroyed in the name of urban renewal, to make way for Roanoke's Civic Center, Interstate 581, and other businesses. Now, to better understand the African American communities that once were, not only in Roanoke, but in some 900 cities across the country, and how that led to what is, I reached out to the exhibit's curators, Charles Price, president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture, and Carl Willers, chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Art. And it's my pleasure to welcome to Buzz for Good Charles Price, who is the board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture in Roanoke, that's located in Center in the Square, and Carl Willers, who is the chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Art. Charles, I want to start with you, and if I could, describe for people who may not have known much about Gainsborough at all, or Black communities, neighborhoods of the 1950s and 60s in Roanoke, what were those neighborhoods like?
They were, you use the term neighborhood, we use the term village, because it was a situation where you had to be self-sufficient. You had to find the things you need, because you were in an area that had an abstract red line around it. So being able to be self-sufficient is one of the key things of what Gainsborough was to the overall village that had the amenities that it needed.
And so those amenities would have included what?
It would include neighbors, which was one of the key factors. It would include churches, medical, recreation, also entertainment.
There were movie theaters, there were nightclubs, there were barbershops,
and schools.
There was everything, grocery stores, everything located right within the village.
The boundaries that were established as to be Gainsborough. The groceries were times that sometimes you had to come across the railroad track to go to the A&P store that was downtown. Others, there would be corner stores in the community that you could get some of the basic things that you needed from that particular store. It wasn't the same as going to the grocery store, but you could get a loaf of bread, you could get ice cream, or basic things that you needed for your family without getting your major things for that week or that month when you would go to the major grocery store.
So it sounds like, the facilities, the businesses, the churches, the schools, homes, all of that was in place. What about just the community itself, the culture, the relationships between everyone who lived there?
During that time growing up, people knew you before you knew them because of the relationship that the parents had. You would know, it would be very easily to say something to a family that's diagonally away from you because you knew somebody there. And that person you could call that's 2 doors down the street and say, your son is coming down the sidewalk, look out for him. They would do so. So you had individuals who lived in different homes, but they were still part of what you would consider your family, your indirect family. Yeah. And that uniqueness is something that has been with the community and still is today in some ways.
So basically, if you were a kid, you knew that all because you were outside of your parents' house didn't mean that you could then act however you wanted, that people were still watching you and would correct you and discipline you, if you acted out.
Exactly. And you don't know how far that surveillance occurred. You don't know if it was 5 blocks away from you or all the way up at 8th Street. You didn't know. And that was the respect that was generated for individuals in your community. There were some people that were bad by the sense of not doing what your family think would be right, but not necessarily bad for police reasons or law reasons. It's just your family thought different than that particular family, but you still respected them. You still provided your respect for your elders, because you knew they were a part of your overall family.
Yeah.
Depending on how far it went, that church did not define where location, other than its physical location. You could have people that are in Gainesboro that would be in Northeast for a particular church, and still, as long as it's in walking distance to get to that church, people know who you were.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And your development of how you would be as a young man or a young woman was something that was taught in the environment that you were in, be it at church, be it at school, be it in your neighborhood. If you went home to eat with a neighbor, with a friend of yours, it wasn't a phone call. It would be someone that passed the word that you're over the house. But at that particular house, whatever the manners they were using, you had to do the same thing.
Sure, sure.
And
There were expectations for
yeah,
everybody. Yeah.
everybody.
Mhm.
You would have educators who would communicate to your parents at church what you may be doing. Or if you really are doing something wrong, you would generally get a phone call before the end of school and before you get home.
Mhm.
And that would end up basically being a scolding by your mom, and could very easily be more stringent reception of what you would be
Yeah.
receiving, because that was not part of what your family was about.
Right, right. Talking here on Buzz for Good with Charles Price, who's the board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture, describing the African American neighborhood village of Gainesboro in Northeast Roanoke during the 1950s and 60s and prior. But then, starting in the late 60s, something happened to all of that. Tell us what happened.
Well, the word that really affects everybody is urban renewal.
Yeah.
That began the process of destruction of the community, although it wasn't looked that way. That began the process where wealth that was being developed for the next generation was no longer able to provide that wealth because of the necessity by the government to expand and increase what their tax revenue to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself had a significant impact on the community that was Gainesboro. The ability to purchase a home again wasn't something that everybody who had had homes could be able to do, because they weren't given the value that they thought it would be. Thus, they ended up being in apartments opposed to being in their own home. And that wealth, that generational wealth, became a problem.
Yeah, this urban renewal you're talking about, that paved the way, quite literally, for the Berglund Civic Center. And what other urban renewals that were done using eminent domain and other powers of government to take away property from African American homeowners?
Well, it would have affected what we call Gainesboro Road now, from the railroad track all the way over to Orange Avenue and then beyond, because it goes on over to Lincoln Terry School because of Washington Park and what was developed and what it was being used for as it relates to the community. Its impact on the cemetery of the 900 bodies being moved from Lick Cemetery so that 581 could come through. Mm-hmm. It also, the development of where the Ford Motors Ford Motors cars were automotive. They moved into an area that was originally residential. Just beyond it, by the time you went to Orange Avenue, which is their parking lot, it used to be a Holiday Inn there. That was uh, something for everybody as it relates to having activities or a multi-purpose space. All of that changed
Yeah.
due to that.
Yeah. And maybe this is a good time to pivot over to our other guest here on Bus for Good. You have been listening to Charles Price, board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture. And now I'd like to turn to Carl Willers, who is the chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Arts, because I wanted you to weigh in here, because a lot of this history of Gainsborough neighborhood, Northeast neighborhood, really would be lost were it not for the efforts of one of the residents there by the name of David Ramey. So if you would introduce David Ramey to us.
Sure. David Ramey was a longtime citizen of Gainsborough. He moved to Roanoke from the Norfolk area in the late 1940s with at a very young age with his mother and father, and then grew up within the Gainsborough neighborhood of Roanoke and Northeast neighborhood of Roanoke. And later in life, he went about consistently recording like his early, his childhood and early adulthood experiences of growing up in the Gainsborough area.
And he recorded these how?
Through drawings, and actually usually about a page or a couple of page story about each drawing that were, he obviously had a photographic memory because the detail that is recorded, not only of just, buildings and streets and automobiles, but also individual people within the community, individual businesses, churches, schools, places of entertainment, are just remarkable memories, very detailed, very exactingly detailed. So it's a remarkable body of work.
Right. And so you, who had the idea to actually collect all of this work and put it in an exhibit?
Well, David Ramey Jr., the artist's son, who still lives here in Roanoke, has spent much of his life trying to preserve his father's work. And his father published one book of drawings and stories during his lifetime in 2012 that he called The Times in Life on Henry Street. And that is, those drawings are over at the Harrison Museum. But he had within, David Ramey Jr. had within his archives of his father's work what was the equivalent of 3 more books about Gainsborough. One called Gainsborough Road and Beyond, of which there were 2 copies, 2 completely different but complete copies, and another body of work that, for convenience sake, we've kind of called Into Northeast, which is, the area of Northeast Roanoke, which is pretty much centered around what's now the Berglund Center, but then was a very dense residential area of the Black community.
So again, you've been listening here to Carl Willers, who's the chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Art, joined by Charles Price, the board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture in Roanoke. And together, both museums are featuring the work of David Ramey through the end of March 29th.
Yes.
Okay, through March 29th. So go see this exhibit right now, because it will come down from the Taubman March 29th. It will remain up in the Harrison Museum for a certain period of time thereafter, but you need to go see both because they are extraordinary drawings, sketches of these communities, these villages, neighborhoods that are no longer. And Carl, I'll ask you, so you've been in Roanoke now for 3 years. What was the most surprising part of this research that you did into these communities?
Well, it was just such an honor to work with these drawings as well as the stories because they reveal an entire past life of the Black community here in Roanoke, which, yeah, especially, right there on those sites no longer exists because of, partly because of the interstate being built. Through town, and partly because of several consecutive urban renewal projects from really the late 50s into the early 70s that destroyed, these communities, destroyed, which included a vast array of small businesses, residential homes, all sorts of community amenities that really go toward making a vital neighborhood.
Yeah.
I guess I find the drawings themselves to bring back to life a community that it's not really possible to get a sense of its of the whole fabric and interwoven nature of the community that's very difficult to get from a photograph. And I'm not sure that a lot of photography exists because one thing that was lost within the development, quote unquote development, but really the loss of Gainesboro were the archives of the Tribune newspaper, which had recorded life
Oh,
within the Gainesboro community for many, many years.
wow. Wow. Yeah, I mean, seeing those sketches is, and I wrote about this in the Cardinal News article that I wrote, was that it depicts a neighborhood that I would want to live in, and the kind of the type of neighborhood that today urban planners, quote unquote, are trying to recreate. Places where people can live and work and shop and be entertained and mix and mingle and socialize, all on the same block. You don't need a car to drive to go see a movie and then to drive somewhere else to go out to eat and then take your kids to school and go to church. It was all right there, and it got decimated by, quote, progress.
Right, very much so. I think one of the things that comes out in the drawings as well as David Ramey's stories is the fact that just the number of cab companies was significant, and everyone knew the two or three, possibly even four cab companies that were available, and serviced the African American community. In a sense, everyone lived pretty much within walking distance, and that's why. It was so closely knit. You saw your neighbors, not only leaving your house, but walking up and down Henry Street, which was sort of the center of the commercial district, or going to church or going to any small business within the community. And it, of necessity, over many, many decades, had to be self-sufficient because we're talking about a period of time in which this part of the world was, completely segregated.
Yeah.
So if you didn't have your own movie theater within the Black community, you did not have a movie theater. If you did not have a
Restaurant,
barber shop, you didn't have any place to go get your hair cut, except, your own home.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just remarkable the amount of information that David Ramey records about really all members within this community, because you can see in the drawings just people interacting on a very casual daily basis and knowing each other very well. Everyone knew everybody. And David Ramey makes that very clear. At times, he just launches into naming every neighbor he has in Northeast, and it is a long list. And it's remarkable, really.
Yeah. Yeah. was again listening there to Carl Willers, who is the chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Art, joined here by Charles Price, board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture. And together, the Harrison Museum and the Taubman Museum have been collaborating for several months now on a exhibit featuring the drawings and sketches of David Ramey, longtime artist working in Roanoke, who depicts the life and times and scenes from Roanoke's Black neighborhoods from the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and into the 70s. And Charles, I want to pivot back to you here now, because Carl was talking about, that the African American community had to be self-sufficient because of the sign of the times and segregation. Basically, Blacks were not allowed in white restaurants and movie theaters and on and on. And I find that it was somewhat ironic that urban renewal and all these projects that were decimating African American communities were happening at a time when supposedly desegregation was taking place and schools were being integrated and African Americans were finally be given the right to vote. Besides the businesses and the homes that were lost, what else was lost during this time?
One of the biggest things is the churches and the schools.
Mm-hmm.
You'd have to understand that in the church scenario, you could be involved with the church 7 days out of the week, or you could be involved with it on specific days. And some of those things consisted of the choir, or it consisted of family activities, and there were certain days that occurred. The development of what the church did for the community and the student was the beginning of exposure for things outside of your community. How you had to be a gentleman, how you had to present yourself. There were so many things that were going on outside of your community that you had to be aware of what was going on around you. You had to be aware of individuals, even though you are supposed to be able to drink at the fountain at a certain time. You would not drink at that fountain because of caution.
Sure.
You don't know if somebody's going to come up and do something to you. Integration was something that was put out as to be the resolution to problems. And actually it created more problems. Trying to mend the communication between parents and teachers really created a problem because of the distance that your child had to go for school compared to where they lived when they had schools within their own community. That tribe or that village concept, more so, that people would be able to communicate better. The principal that you may have had at one elementary school, now that child is going to another elementary school across the way, across the railroad tracks or somewhere else, but not within walking distance sometimes. And yet the child needs help and assistance, but the teacher may not put the full amount of help that would have been done prior to integration. And the other thing is that the church is used with one of the mechanisms of developing individuals who would be able to carry themselves in a discussion correctly. When I say that is, you'd have to understand that not only did you go to church for religious scenarios as a child, you started out in kindergarten with repeating your Bible verse at the end of service. After that, some of the kids moved up to reading the welcome or doing the other aspects of what the service may consist of. And by the time they became middle school or high school, they would be the ones conducting the service on Children's Day or some other activity, announcement of visitors. What was happening to the child that they didn't know, that child didn't know about, was they are beginning to be exposed as public speakers, that they can stand up in front of individuals and speak whatever they're talking about doing, and not be afraid of doing that. And that was, just a back thing behind the church that people, especially young folks, did not realize. Well, this is the beginning of becoming a public speaker,
Right.
and develop yourself and the skills you need to have to do that, and how you stood there and presented yourself. Because what they would throw to you when you presented yourself is that you are standing up there representing your family. And they would say, Charles, I know you don't slouch like that. I know you don't look down. He said, you have 75 people sitting out in the audience. Each one of them, you want to be able to look them in the face and have them believe what you're saying is correct. And they can't do that if your head is looking down toward the podium. The reality of things that they brought, not only in the church, but the educator that went to the church, the policeman that went to the church. When you got away from those institutions, the same thing was being developed for the welfare of the community, because you knew that somebody's going to be retiring in the Black community doing something, and we got to find out or prepare the next person to be able to take that position, so that it would make the community better. We would be able to, from the church and education, to leave Roanoke and be able to develop ourselves into something that would improve the state and development of that child and that child's family later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Your point about, integration from, here I am, middle-aged white guy, always viewed, integration or desegregation as these good things. And in concept, of course, they are, should never have been the other way. But the way that they were implemented inevitably created further injustices and grievance for African Americans. We did a Buzz episode on the Christiansburg Institute a couple of years ago, African American school in Christiansburg, founded in 1866, a year after the Civil War ended, for recently newly freed slaves. And it operated for 100 years. And at that school, students inevitably would say that they had high expectations from teachers and administrators. They were expected to not only learn well, but behave well. And that when integration finally happened, it wasn't, white students being assimilated into their school. Christiansburg Institute got closed, and all of its Black students had to then find a way to assimilate into the previously whites-only schools. And the teachers there, inevitably, or more often than not, would view them as being less than. And so therefore they would put them in the remedial classes. And oftentimes they may have been the only white or the only Black student in a class. And just the impact that had on their lives then and moving forward. I've yet to meet someone who attended a segregated school, a Black student who attended a segregated school, welcoming the opportunity to then go to a previously whites-only school. It's always a time of dread and fear and not thriving in that environment, which is, people don't recognize that today. Then what does that do, years later, decades later, generations later? We talk about, what is the legacy of racial injustice, and is it still happening? And I would say yes. And I think these scenes that David Ramey portrays show that.
He shows the positive. There are very few of his drawings that are negative. He has a couple of drawings actually showing demolition of a site. He has a couple of drawings where you could see something happened to somebody because the Huntington life-saving crew was there. And it doesn't imply that it was violent or what, but the life-saving crew. But other than that, majority of his work are showing things of a family or families or individuals enjoying life,
Mhm.
being able to do and move within a community without restrictions within that community. He shows where police are there, that these policemen are part of the community. They can walk up and talk to the kid and invite him to different activities, which they may be doing, sponsoring something with the Y, but just finding out and speaking to them. Probably some of them may go to church with them, but it was a relationship of respect, and you honored that information. So when the conversation was going to changing from segregation to integration, to be able to do things, yes, if the churches were saying it was a good idea and the influence that they had at that time, the congregation of people went along with it.
Well, again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Charles Price, board president of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture, and Carl Willers, the chief curator for the Taubman Museum of Art. And together, both these wonderful institutions are collaborating and co-hosting an exhibit by David Ramey, who lived in the Gainsborough Northeast neighborhoods of Roanoke during the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Well, actually, he lived there until his passing in 2017. Is that right? Yeah. So he lived there till his passing until 2017, but has these wonderful drawings and sketches that are currently on display at the Taubman through March 29th, and then for the month of April at the Harrison Museum of African American Culture. Charles, let me start with you. What do you want people who come to this exhibit to learn and walk away with?
Well, first, I would like for them to look at the artwork and see that this man, who had no formal training, had the capability of presenting artwork in such a way that for most of us, it was real. The work is presented is real. It is something that reflects the life and capabilities of a community to survive as long as it did under the circumstances that it was started out being. The other thing is, when I talk about his style, he has a unique way of penmanship of presenting information so that it reflects in such a way that you can look at it and see that it's real, that the individual, yeah, he looked like that. Or the flooring, yes, it looked like that. The capabilities of doing that and the capabilities of the community to maintain a style that let generation after generation exist until we get into the point of urban renewal in the community. And it just devastated everything. Mm-hmm. Economics, the other pillar that you need to have, was now being dispersed in other localities besides just the community. Churches were relocating outside of Gainsborough. For whatever reason, that was what was the main churches. They moved to other locations. The ability, I was fortunate that the individuals that I went to school in the kindergarten or grade 1, I still knew all the way through high school. Most of us knew majority of our students, the students that were in their class, because of the fact that they, a lot of time, were going from elementary school straight into junior high and then high school. Mm-hmm. And it had an impact. It had an impact on us overall, being able to grow, develop our families, expand our capabilities. And people don't realize that what Ramey was putting together were things that actually happened. To see the uniqueness of his style, and then to see the character of the individuals that he's presenting to you, it doesn't say anything that they're bad. It shows that they're just like any other human being, and that what they have to offer is things that happen within their community. And I think David does a unique way of doing that. And when you look at artwork, his penmanship and things that he shows and his style, it's you just can't believe it, that that's what he did. But then to add on to that is to know that what he is talking about is what existed. And I use the word talking because it's artwork to a lot of us talks. It speaks to us.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. Carl, let me pivot over to you here to answer that question. What do you hope they walk away with?
Well, I guess what first comes to mind is just such the rich history of Roanoke and this community, and the realization that this is not unique to Roanoke, that urban renewal and the building of the interstate system and other processes destroyed communities across this nation. And inevitably, it was the poor inner city communities that were often like the Black communities or other minority communities. Over 900 cities really suffered the same fate as Gainsborough. But it's only like what makes Roanoke distinctive is that it did have a very distinctive and lively, fully like joyful, I think, community that it was often called a little Harlem or a Harlem of the South because of the accomplishments, the amazing accomplishments in almost every profession, from lawyers, doctors, professionals of all kinds that, and certainly ministers and churches that made huge contributions to the overall culture, but certainly to their own community. And to know that, to learn about that, to be proud of that is like something that I think David Ramey very consciously wanted to convey to younger people, that he knew, and for younger people within this community, in future years. It was a remarkable community. They were remarkable citizens who made great contributions.
Charles, any parting thoughts that you want to share about any of this?
The presentation is well beyond what expectations we would have had relative to his work. There are at time when David came over to talk to the Harrison about trying to do this, I told him we did not have the capability to do it with the scale that he was talking about. And I didn't know how many drawings that he had in mind, but now I find out it was a total of 700. I'm glad I did say, maybe you may want to talk to the time, but not knowing what's going to happen with the process. But it is a uniqueness about it. And I'm glad to be able to show children the capability of somebody. If you just want to do it, you have to develop it, and that you can do that by yourself or with instruction, but don't give up. And you have something to point as a teaching tool. And that's what I like about it more than anything else. It's not so bold. It's not something that you've got to look at and say, oh, that looks like a rock. And it has no resemblance, but that's what the artist says. In this work, if it's somebody cutting hair, you can see the barber, you can see the person in the chair, you can see the barber chair as well as the hair on the floor that's been cut. Those are unique things that you just don't see all the time. Yeah. And I'm not the curator as Carl is. I'm just looking at it from the viewpoint that I wonder if he went to Mr. Reynolds' barbershop or to Mr. Green's barbershop, but those are things that just pops up that you can think about on a Friday when you go to the barbershop to get the haircut for a Saturday, you sort of figure out what time you're going to be at the barbershop so you can find out what's going on at whatever club or wherever something else is going to happen. And then you talk about it while you're in the movie theater, which is around the corner. Those type of memories are things that, David at times, I think, teased the people who know about it and are talking to their kids about it. But the artists looking at it, they just might say, why did he do that? Because that's the way it was. And I think that's the uniqueness about David, that people have not seen his work begin to come back and spend an hour over the museum. We had one lady, fortunately for her, she came in around 2:30. We were closing at 3, and we left about 3:20. And she's coming back this week to finish her review of the writers, and she only got not even halfway through. But that's what this brings about, exposure and knowledge to the city overall. That when you talk about urban renewal and you see what was there, and now you see an area that's been devastated, where you could get on your bicycle, go up a hill, which is generally pushing your bike, but at the top of the hill, you come flying back down on your bicycle, hoping that you can make it back up the hill and you got enough speed to get up to the hill before the car behind you blows the horn at you.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the things that David tries to present to you, though.
Yeah.
Charles's contributions to this project overall have just been extraordinary because he knew David Ramey personally. I think they attended the same church growing up. Charles also, is of a generation that does remember what David Ramey is picturing and the stories that he's telling us about the community. And David Ramey himself, I think, had a really keen insight in that the many of the problems and issues, social problems, community issues that we face today are rooted in the loss of communities such as Gainsborough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Carl Willers, Chief Curator for the Taubman Museum of Art, and Charles Price, Board President of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on A Buzz for Good and share the life, the legacy, the art of David Ramey and its depiction of a community that once was, and hopefully some knowledge of that history can help reclaim some of that, for the future.
I think one of the things that people don't realize when they look at the artwork, that it has a uniqueness to it, and that is Roanoke is seeing artwork that nobody else has seen. Maybe growing up, you've seen some of the scenes themselves as it relates to the Black community, but overall, Roanoke is seeing the first presentation of David Ramey's work to the public. Hopefully, we will be able to work with the Taubman work with Harrison to be able to get this as a traveling exhibit from Roanoke, because it is that unique. And that uniqueness, it's within itself is a surprise, because you really are taken back when you see his work.
Well, many thanks again to Charles Price and Carl Willers of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture and Taubman Museum of Art for sharing with us about the David Ramey exhibit. Now, once again, it is open through March 29th at the Taubman Museum and for all of April at the Harrison Museum. Now, none of this exhibit would have been possible without the work of David Ramey's son, David Ramey Jr. And I was fortunate enough to be able to catch up with him this week to learn more about his father.
He moved to Roanoke in 1949. He was born in 1939 in a rural area of Montville called Ridgeway, Chestnut Knob. It was a very, very rural area. And as a young boy, they moved to Roanoke in 1949. And where they moved to an area called Short Patton Avenue. And from that area, you could see all of Henry Street, all of Northeast, and everything from his back porch and his front porch, all of Gainesboro, and that's how he fell so in love with Roanoke, with Henry Street and Northeast and Gainesboro, is because he lived right in the middle of it. And he could see all of it. And it was very exciting for a young man around 9 or 10 years old, moving from a place so rural to a place so exciting and with hustle and bustle every day. And he used to tell me stories about how busy it was and how you saw people everywhere, in and out, getting out of cars, going to different restaurants, going to different businesses and things like that. And that's how he fell so in love with Henry Street.
Yeah. And then it was after kind of the loss of Henry Street and the loss of those neighborhoods where he decided to start putting pen and to paper and depicting these images that he had still in his mind from his childhood.
Yes, for years, he just would, tell it was always a part of him. And the more that you saw it deteriorate and not exist anymore, the more that it really bothered him. And that's when, and then his health started not to be so good. So he started to write stories and draw images of Henry Street, Northeast, Gainesboro, all of the first black organizations such as Borough Memorial Hospital, Hunting Life Saving Crew, and other, important businesses and hotels and restaurants and doctor's offices and dentist offices and different things like that. And it was just like the pages of his life that, and it still amazes me to this day how detailed his work is. And it's just very astonishing that an individual could just picture things in his mind and then transfer it onto paper, and put the words on paper. Let's see. It's really hard to say how many he created because a lot of his work was sold. He sold himself, was sold and given away years ago. And there are a lot of people out there with his work. So if you added that to the work that I bought back from collectors and he gave to me, it would probably be up in around 1,800 or 2,000 pieces of work, I would say, or more. But in the collection, the body of work that I have, that I own right now, so it's probably around somewhere around the high 600 or 700 pieces. It amazes me when I do happen to see a piece here and there that I don't have. Just like for years, there was a couple of pictures that I didn't have that I used to see copies of all the time. And I had no idea that they were in the municipal building downtown Roanoke, Virginia. And to Douglas Jackson, the art and coordinator director of Roanoke City, told me that those two pieces were on this third floor or the second floor. I'm not sure. And I went there and I saw them for the first time. And it really amazed me. And then another individual, he held a position with Roanoke City He was an inspector. And he took me to his office one day, and there was a very large piece of my daddy's work hanging behind his desk that I had never seen before. So there are a lot of pieces out there that I haven't seen. Or I've seen copies of, but I haven't seen originals of. He was let me first say, he was very firm and strict. But he was a very loving father who took care of his kids, who loved kids in general. Just how important it was to him to draw these images and write these words down to share with people who he came up with, people after him, and certainly the younger generations that never had the opportunity to see Northeast or Henry Street or Gainsborough when it was in its prime. They can look at his images and read his words and experience it to a certain extent, if that makes sense.
Tell me about your experience of being part of, having his work featured in these two wonderful museums.
It's really, really hard to describe the feelings that I'm experiencing right now, because I've really been working hard on this, going on 7 years. And my number one objective has always been to continue his legacy, to continue his chain of thought, how he felt about these places, how he felt about these people, these businesses. It was a very, very large part of his life. And my objective has always been to continue his legacy. And it's really hard to put into words what I'm feeling right now, because it's all happening right now. It's unfolding right in front of my eyes. It's becoming reality. Seeing his work hanging in museums, and the awards that he's about to receive. They're about to make a David Rainey Day. They're about to do a scholarship every year in his name to a artist going off to school. They're naming different things after him. I just can't believe it's happening. But this is a very large part of continuing his legacy, because my dreams are coming true. My legacy is being fulfilled. My legacy is to continue his legacy.
Lastly, what would he make of this exhibit if he were still with us?
Wow. I think he would love it, because it's his work and it's being seen by many people, and his story is being told. Not only his story, but the story of many people who he wrote about, and many of the businesses that he put on paper. And he would be very proud that his work is getting the recognition that it's getting right now. He would be very proud.
And obviously you are as well.
I am so proud of my dad. Like I've said many times before, it's usually the child is proud of it's usually the parent is proud of the child. And in this situation, it's reversed. It's definitely the child is proud of the parent.
Well, Mr. Ramey, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
It's been my pleasure. And anything else I can do to help continue my dad's legacy, I'm all in.
And that'll do it for today's Buzz for Good. Once again, I really hope to see you on Sunday, April 14th, 2 p.m. at the Taubman Museum of Art in Roanoke for our Buzz for Good sponsored concert featuring the Nashville trio Domino. It's going to be wonderful. Better than that, it's going to be free. So come and join us and listen to this wonderful music headlined by Southwest Virginia's own Addie Levy, who will be both singing and playing an exceptional mandolin. Now, until then, I hope each of you continues to be a buzz for good in your community. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you back here again next week. Bye now.